It always starts with a glamour shot, a red carpet, a flash of cameras, a gown slipping across a runway like liquid gold. That's what the world remembers about Keira Knightley. The elegance, the poise, the beauty that seemed almost unreal, like it was stitched together from the fabric of old Hollywood. For most people, Keira became a symbol of romance, of period drama, of cinematic perfection. But behind that flawless image was a truth she never fully revealed, until now. In her latest interview, Keira Knightley spoke with a calmness that only comes from years of silent endurance. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth. And that truth, raw, dark, and deeply human, has shaken the entire entertainment world. Because for the first time, Keira admitted what fame did to her. And it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't magical. It was terrifying. People forget how young she was when the spotlight swallowed her. She wasn't a woman yet. She wasn't even out of her teens. She was just a girl barely old enough to vote, drive, or understand herself when Hollywood decided she was the next big thing. One day, she was a quiet teenager auditioning in the UK. The next, Pirates of the Caribbean exploded onto screens and made her the face of one of the biggest franchises in the world. Overnight, the world decided they owned her. Keira became everyone's obsession. Her face was on billboards, her interviews were everywhere, her fashion choices rippled through magazines. She was praised for her performances, criticized for her body, romanticized for her beauty, and targeted for her fame. And it didn't take long before the paparazzi began circling. Keira said something chilling in her interview, something that reveals the psychological prison she lived in. "I thought I was going mad," she said. "They followed me everywhere. They screamed at me. They provoked me. They made me feel unsafe in my own skin. And I just hid." That sentence, "I just hid," says everything. Because fame didn't elevate her. It cornered her. It suffocated her. It chased her into darkness. People imagine fame as a spotlight, but for Keira, it was a spotlight attached to a trap. A spotlight she couldn't turn off. A spotlight she had to endure even when she wanted to disappear. She described how paparazzi used to swarm her outside her home, hundreds of men, pushing, shouting, blocking her car, flashing lights in her face. Imagine waking up every morning knowing an army of strangers is waiting to scream at you. Imagine opening your door and hearing insults designed to provoke you. Imagine being 19, 20 years old and feeling hunted. Not admired. Hunted. And the worst part, she had no one to protect her. Hollywood loved her when she was glamorous. But when she struggled, when she crumbled, when she cried, Hollywood was silent. Keira explained that the paparazzi didn't just follow her, they antagonized her. They wanted reactions. They wanted fear. They wanted breakdowns. They wanted tears because tears sold magazines, stories, clicks. She recalled walking down a street and hearing grown men her father's age, shouting vile, degrading comments at her. Not because they hated her, but because they wanted a quote, a reaction, something to twist into a headline. And Keira, realizing she couldn't escape, began trying to shrink herself. She wore hats, sunglasses, layers of clothing. She walked quickly. She kept her head down. But it didn't matter. The flashing lights always found her. In the interview, she paused and laughed quietly, not a happy laugh, but the laugh of someone who still can't quite believe what they survived. "I think I dissociated for a few years," she said. "I wasn't fully present. It was like I was there, but not really there." That sentence is haunting, because dissociation is not glamour. It's not beauty. It's a trauma response. Keira wasn't living. She was enduring. And while the world saw a rising star in Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, Love Actually, King Arthur, she was privately unraveling. The pressure was relentless. The scrutiny was suffocating. She couldn't walk into a grocery store without being photographed. She couldn't eat at a restaurant without whispers. She couldn't make a single mistake without tabloids tearing her apart. Her body became the main target. The media obsessed over her weight. They accused her of being unhealthy. They speculated about eating disorders. They treated her body like public property, commenting, dissecting, criticizing. She was reduced to headlines that didn't care about truth or humanity. Keira told the interviewer something devastating. "I was accused of things I didn't do. I was accused of disorders I didn't have, and I was shamed constantly. I felt like I was being punished for existing. Punished for existing. Those words cut deep. Imagine being a young woman told every day by the world that your body is wrong, that your image is a scandal, that you are not allowed to exist freely because your existence belongs to public consumption. It is no surprise that Keira admitted she considered quitting acting altogether. She thought fame would destroy her. She thought the public wanted her to fall apart. She thought the world hated her. And as she opened up during the interview, her voice broke not from weakness, but from memory. Because it takes years to recover from that kind of exposure. Years to rebuild your sense of self, years to feel safe again. But then she said something even more revealing. The worst thing was the noise, she said softly. The shouting, always the shouting. I would hear them even when no one was there. I would imagine cameras everywhere. I couldn't breathe. That is not fame, that is trauma. Her confession explains why she stepped away from Hollywood for a while, why she became more selective with roles, why she avoided blockbuster-level fame. She knew that if she continued on the same path, she might lose herself completely. So she withdrew, quietly, intentionally, not because she stopped loving acting, but because she needed to survive. And while the world thought she was simply choosing indie films or focusing on her personal life, the truth was far more painful. Keira Knightley was healing. Healing from the years when fame felt violent. Healing from the moments when she feared losing her mind. Healing from the humiliation of public scrutiny. Healing from the way strangers treated her like prey. She told the interviewer she learned how to find herself again in slow, fragile steps. Therapy, family, privacy, choosing roles that felt meaningful, not massive. Choosing directors who cared about her, not headlines. Choosing life over spectacle. And even now, decades after the frenzy began, her relationship with fame is cautious, respectful, intentional. She no longer believes fame is a reward. She sees it as a responsibility, one she carries carefully, one she protects herself from. But despite everything she suffered, Keira's confession wasn't bitter. It wasn't resentful. It wasn't angry. It was honest, raw, human, because she wanted people to understand that fame isn't freedom. Fame, for her, was a cage. A beautiful cage, gilded with movie roles and magazine covers, but a cage nonetheless. She didn't tell her story for attention. She told it for closure, for clarity, for the generation of young actors rising behind her, those who dream of fame without understanding the price. And she told it because, after so many years of silence, she finally felt strong enough to speak without trembling. Toward the end of the interview, the host asked her the question everyone wondered. Do you regret becoming famous so young? Keira paused, a long, emotional pause. She didn't smile, she didn't blink, she just breathed slowly and finally said, I don't regret the work, I regret the cost. That sentence has been echoing across the internet ever since. Because the cost she spoke of wasn't money, it wasn't time, it wasn't even privacy. It was peace, her sanity, her sense of safety. She gave those away because she didn't know she could say no. She didn't know she could set boundaries. She didn't know she could walk away. And now, after everything she endured, she finally sees herself clearly. Not as a celebrity, not as an icon, not as Hollywood's favorite period drama queen, but as a human being, a woman who survived fame, a woman who found her voice after years of being shouted over, a woman who understands her worth beyond the lens of a camera. And as she told her story, the terrifying truth behind her early fame, the world listened. Not because she was famous, but because she was honest, and honesty from someone who spent years hiding is more powerful than any movie, any award, any red carpet moment. What Keira revealed in that interview is only the beginning, because the full story of how early fame nearly broke her and how she rebuilt herself goes even deeper. And the rest of that story is far more heartbreaking, shocking, and inspiring than anyone expected. But what the world didn't know, what Keira had kept buried for nearly 2 decades, was how deeply the shadows of fame had wrapped themselves around her mind. Section by section, she peeled back the layers during her interview. And what emerged was a portrait of a young woman pushed to the edge long before she even understood what that edge was. Keira explained that the world saw her as that poised girl in gowns, the effortless beauty who embodied elegance and grace. But she confessed something quietly, almost hesitantly, as if saying it aloud was still unfamiliar. "I wasn't poised," she said. "I was terrified." Those 3 words reframed her entire career. Because while critics praised her composure, what she was actually doing was surviving, suppressing fear, suppressing anxiety, suppressing the panic that lived in her throat every time she stepped outside. "I looked calm," she admitted, "but inside I was shaking." She described walking into movie premieres with her heart racing so violently she thought she might faint. Not because she feared performing, she loved acting, but because she feared the frenzy outside. The crowds, the flashing lights, the men with cameras crowding into her space, shouting anything they could think of to provoke her. She recounted one incident so disturbing it stayed with her for years. She was leaving an event barely 21 years old when a pack of paparazzi trapped her against a car. They surrounded her so tightly she couldn't move. Some screamed insults, some screamed compliments, some flashed their cameras inches from her face. And she remembered feeling the world blur into a tunnel of noise and light. "I thought I would pass out," she said. "I was shaking so much I couldn't talk, I couldn't breathe. And I kept asking myself, why is this happening? Why do they hate me?" But they didn't hate her. They didn't even see her. She wasn't a person to them. She was a target, a commodity, a paycheck. The most painful part was when she told the interviewer she tried to ask for help. "I told people I couldn't handle it," she said. "I said I was scared. I said I needed a break. But people told me it was normal. They said I should be grateful. They said it was the price of success." The price of success. That phrase haunted her. Because when success feels like a threat, when success feels like losing yourself, when success feels like fear, you begin to wonder if it's worth anything at all. Keira revealed that she suffered panic attacks, violent, overwhelming episodes after the height of the Pirates of the Caribbean craze. Not once, not occasionally, frequently. She couldn't walk into public spaces without scanning for cameras. She couldn't enjoy a meal without paranoia. She couldn't sleep because every night replayed the trauma of the day. The saddest confession came when she whispered, "I just wanted to disappear." It wasn't a desire for tragedy, it was a desire for peace. A desire to be unseen, unobserved, untouched by the world's gaze. She said she tried everything to cope. Meditation, books, long walks, isolation. But nothing helped because the storm wasn't in her environment. It was in her mind. The noise of fame followed her everywhere. The interviewer asked her when she realized she needed to step back from blockbusters. And Keira said she knew the moment her fear became bigger than her passion. "It wasn't acting that frightened me," she explained. "It was everything around it. The noise, the expectations, the loss of control." Control was the word she kept returning to. In her early 20s, she had none. Her image was not her own. Her narrative was not her own. Her peace was not her own. And losing those things, especially when you're still discovering yourself, is emotionally catastrophic. She described herself as a shell during those years, working constantly, giving interviews, memorizing scripts, but feeling empty, drained, detached. She played characters beautifully, but she couldn't play herself, because she no longer knew who she was outside of the industry that consumed her. Then she spoke about something rarely discussed in Hollywood: humiliation. Not verbal humiliation, emotional humiliation. She recalled reading magazine articles dissecting her body like an object on a table. One article cruelly called her a walking skeleton. Another questioned whether she was a bad influence on young girls. Another simulated a diagnosis of an eating disorder she didn't have. Keira said the media took her body, the body she didn't choose, the body she simply lived in, and turned it into public property. They attacked it, mocked it, speculated about it, shamed it. She remembered crying alone in hotel rooms, staring at herself in the mirror, wondering why the world had decided her natural shape was a scandal. She wondered why grown adults felt entitled to smear a young girl's body across the front pages. "I felt violated," she said. I felt like I didn't belong in my own skin. And that violation didn't end there. The paparazzi photos became worse. The public commentary became harsher. Every red carpet became a battlefield. Keira confessed that by her mid-20s, she couldn't go anywhere without preparing for humiliation. She rehearsed how to walk, how to smile, how to pose not out of vanity, but out of fear. Her face became armor, her smile became a shield. But shields get heavy, and eventually, she broke. The interview revealed a turning point in her life, an incident that became the moment she knew she couldn't continue living the way she was. She described walking down a street in London when a paparazzi ambush erupted. Men jumped out of cars, cameras flashed, someone shouted something disgusting at her, someone else stepped in front of her, someone else grabbed her elbow, and something inside her snapped. "I ran," she whispered. "I just ran. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. I just needed to escape." It was raining. Her shoes were slippery. Her bag fell. She cried openly for the first time in years. And when she finally reached a quiet corner, she collapsed against a wall and shook uncontrollably. For the first time, she realized she was no longer living. She was surviving. And that moment, broken, soaked, terrified, was the moment she decided to reclaim her life. She fired people. She changed her team. She stopped accepting certain roles. She stepped away from Hollywood blockbusters. She closed her circle. She sought therapy. She learned boundaries. She learned how to say no. No became her salvation. She told the interviewer she didn't want fame anymore, at least not the version she had been given. She wanted control, she wanted peace, she wanted to breathe. She said acting saved her, but Hollywood almost destroyed her. And then she said something that left the interviewer silent. "I wasn't sure I would make it to 30. For years, she had been living with a level of fear and pressure no young woman should ever experience. She was carrying trauma on her shoulders that she didn't have words for until much later. But she survived, and her survival wasn't glamorous. It was slow. It was painful. It was deliberate. She talked about meeting the love of her life, her husband, and how his steadiness became a turning point. She felt seen for the first time, not as a celebrity, not as an image, but as a person. He didn't care about Hollywood. He didn't care about fame. He cared about her. And for someone who had been treated like a product for so long, that kind of care changed everything. Gradually, she found joy again. She rediscovered what she loved about acting, the craft, the emotion, the storytelling, not the noise. She sought smaller films, deeper scripts, directors who valued her humanity. She became more selective, not because she was difficult, but because she was healing. She found roles that aligned with her roles, that let her reflect, express, and finally, breathe. As she spoke about her journey, she admitted she still struggles with anxiety. She still hates being photographed unexpectedly. She still feels a jolt of fear when she sees flashes of light. Trauma doesn't disappear. It settles into the edges of your life like a quiet shadow. But now she knows how to manage it. Now she knows she is not powerless. Now she knows fame cannot break her again. The most powerful moment of the interview came near the end of section 2, when she looked directly at the camera and said, "I survived fame. I survived the version of it that tried to swallow me. And now, for the first time, I'm choosing how my life looks." It wasn't a declaration of victory. It was a declaration of ownership. Keira Knightley no longer belongs to Hollywood. She belongs to herself. But the final part of her story, the part we dive into in section 3, is the most important one. How she healed, how she found her voice, how she reclaimed her identity, and how she faces fame today with strength, wisdom, and a clarity she never had before. Healing was never instant for Keira Knightley. It wasn't a switch she flipped or a revelation that healed every wound. It was slow, uneven, and painfully human. When she talked about this final chapter, her recovery, the room felt different, softer, quieter, as if everyone listening instinctively understood that this was the part she had kept closest to her chest. Keira began by saying something simple, almost gentle. "I had to learn how to be a person again." It didn't sound dramatic. It didn't sound poetic. It sounded true. Fame had reduced her identity to images, performances, and narratives created by people who didn't know her. healing meant unlearning all of that. Healing meant peeling those layers off and finding the girl beneath the girl who loved reading, who loved silence, who loved disappearing into characters not because she wanted to hide from herself, but because acting made her feel alive. In her late 20s, while the world believed she was simply becoming an indie darling, Keira was quietly teaching herself how to breathe again. She took time away from blockbuster pressure. She chose projects with intimacy rather than spectacle. She surrounded herself with people who didn't want anything from her, people who were happy to sit with her on a couch for hours without speaking a word. She learned the difference between solitude and loneliness. Loneliness had been forced on her. Solitude was something she chose. One of the most striking things she admitted was that she had to relearn something people take for granted: walking down a street. "I didn't know how to exist in public without fear," she said. "I had lived in survival mode for so long that normal life felt foreign." The paparazzi who had once terrorized her were still out there, but she was no longer the 20-year-old girl standing frozen in a swarm of cameras. Therapy taught her how to identify triggers, how to soothe panic, how to recognize that she wasn't in danger anymore. Her mind had been conditioned to expect threat where there was none, and she needed time to dismantle that instinct. She talked about how motherhood transformed her healing in ways she didn't expect. Becoming a mother didn't erase her trauma, it reframed it. "I realized I didn't want my children to grow up feeling watched or judged," she said softly. "I didn't want them to see me afraid." Motherhood demanded strength, but it also gave her something she hadn't felt in years: purpose not connected to performance. Her daughters became the grounding force she never knew she needed. They didn't care about her films, her awards, or her photo shoots. They cared if she was present. They cared if she laughed. They cared if she was happy. And so Keira began dedicating herself to something she had denied herself for years: joy. It wasn't overwhelming, dramatic joy, it was quiet joy, steady joy. The kind of joy that comes from dim mornings with tea and soft blankets, from long walks without cameras, from cooking meals without being interrupted, from spending entire days without being anyone's spectacle. For the first time since she was a teenager, she was simply Keira, a woman, a mother, a wife, not an icon, not a phenomenon, not the face of the 2000s, just Keira. But even as she healed, new challenges surfaced. She explained that returning to acting, really returning, was terrifying. "I had to ask myself if I could be an actor without sacrificing my mental health," she said. And that question lingered with her for years, because acting was never the problem. The world around acting, the industry, the publicity, the exposure was the danger. So she created new rules for herself. Rules that protected her, insulated her, gave her structure in a world that had once consumed her. She refused roles that demanded intense public campaigns. She limited press tours. She avoided the kind of fame that required her to be everywhere, all at once. She rejected any project that put her under the microscope again. She would act, but she wouldn't be a spectacle ever again. Her career shifted, but her talent didn't. Critics praised her for roles in films that felt intimate, artistic, meaningful, and for the first time, Keira wasn't performing to meet expectations, she was performing because she wanted to. Acting became her sanctuary instead of her nightmare. In the interview, she spoke about the moment she realized she had finally found peace. It was ordinary, not cinematic. She was at home, sitting in her garden, watching her children run around, laughing. The sun was warm, the world was quiet, and suddenly she realized something profound. "I didn't feel watched, I didn't feel hunted, I didn't feel exposed. I just existed." Her voice cracked slightly as she said it. For someone who had spent her youth being consumed by the world's gaze, existing without being observed was a luxury she had never known. She went on to describe how her perception of fame has changed. She no longer sees it as something to fear, but she respects its danger. "Fame is not evil," she said. "It's powerful, and like anything powerful, it can harm you if you don't understand it." Keira's understanding of fame now is grounded, mature, balanced. She doesn't glamorize it. She doesn't despise it. She treats it with caution, like a wild animal she's learned how to coexist with. The interviewer asked her if she ever wished she could go back and talk to her younger self, the girl who was thrust into the spotlight without warning. Keira smiled softly, a bittersweet smile, and said, "I'd tell her it's okay to walk away, it's okay to take time, it's okay to be scared, and it's okay to ask for help." That's when the interview shifted from confession to revelation. Keira started speaking about the culture of perfection in Hollywood, the illusion that celebrities must always appear unbreakable. She criticized the expectation that young actors must endure pressure silently because that's the industry. She said she hopes her honesty makes it easier for the next generation of actors to speak openly about mental health. Then she said something that resonated so deeply. The clip went viral within hours. Vulnerability shouldn't be a scandal. She explained that the world sees celebrities as flawless, untouchable beings, but they are human, fragile, uncertain, imperfect. She said fame amplifies everything: insecurities, mistakes, fears. And the more famous you are, the harder it becomes to admit weakness, because the world treats weakness like a headline. Keira refused to let that be her story anymore. Her interview wasn't a breakdown, it was a breakthrough. It was a woman reclaiming her narrative after years of having it twisted. It was a mother explaining why she chose healing over hype. It was an artist reminding the world that behind every glamorous photo is a human being with a heart that bruises easily. She talked about boundaries, how she protects her peace. She doesn't read tabloids. She limits her time on social media. She chooses privacy over publicity. She keeps her personal life separate from her career. These boundaries aren't restrictions, they're her survival tools. One of the most powerful moments came when she addressed the younger generation directly. She said she sees young women entering the industry now bright-eyed, ambitious, unbroken, and she fears for them. Not because she doubts their strength, but because she knows what the industry can do to someone who isn't prepared. Fame feels like love at first, she said, but it's not love. It's attention. And attention disappears the moment you stop giving people what they want. She said she hopes young actors prioritize themselves over the spotlight, that they learn to say no earlier, that they protect their mental health fiercely, that they understand fame is not worth sacrificing their identity. The interview closed with a reflection so profound it left viewers speechless. "I lost myself to fame when I was too young to understand what I was losing. But I found myself again in the quiet moments, in the spaces between the noise, in the people who loved me long before I was famous. And now, finally, I feel safe. Safe. The one thing fame never gave her." Keira Knightley's confession didn't just expose the dark side of early stardom. It illuminated the resilience of a woman who fought her way through fear, trauma, and public scrutiny to rediscover her own humanity. She didn't tell her story to gain sympathy. She told it to reclaim her power. She told it because she knows silence protects problems, not people. She told it because someone, somewhere, will hear it and realize they are not alone. And in doing so, she transformed her trauma into something meaningful, something honest, something courageous. Keira Knightley survived the version of fame designed to break her. And today, she stands stronger, gentler, wiser. Not in the spotlight's glow, but in the peace she built with her own hands. Her confession wasn't just a story. It was a warning, a lesson, and a liberation. A reminder that even the brightest stars cast shadows, and that surviving those shadows is a victory few people ever get to see.